Let's also tell you that the House of Representatives has passed for the third reading the 2024 Supplementary Appropriation Bill for the Federal Capital Administration of about 98.5 billion naira. This was as the chairman of the House Committee on the Federal Capital Territory presented his committee's report, saying that the appropriation bill earlier presented by the president has been thoroughly scrutinized and should be considered for the needed development of the capital. The submission was then unanimously adopted by the House in the Committee of the Whole. And now to discuss this, we are joined by Vayala Kwaga, Senior Researcher and Policy Analyst, Budget Foundation. Thank you so much, Vayala, for joining us.
Hi, Lekon. Thanks for having me.
Yes, considering the timing of the year June 2024, well, is a supplementary budget of this size, we're talking about 98.5 billion naira, typical for the Federal Capital Territory Administration. Also, were there any unforeseen circumstances that might justify this additional spending?
I suppose if you look at Nigeria's past performance, the FCT's past performance when it comes to coming up with budgets, this is actually quite unusual. But with the new minister of the FCT being the infamous Wike, it's not particularly surprising. Wike is someone who I think is well known for implementing capital projects, as much as you might disagree with his politics. And looking at the communication and the commentary from residents of the FCT, it appears that he's actually putting paid to a lot of the beliefs about him in terms of infrastructure in the FCT. However, what is worrying, I suppose, would be the total amounts to date. There was recently a 1.2 trillion naira supplementary budget passed, I think a couple of months ago for the FCT, and plus this 98 billion is bringing the total budget, within these two very brief periods to about 1.3 trillion naira. And, that, be that as it may, we need to know how this money is being used, as it's used for projects.
Well, that actually tells us that typically we usually do not have a breakdown of budget allocation in these like manners. But then if we were to look at it, a concentration of trillions of naira to be expended for the FCT, is there any justification? Are there going to be turnovers that will be beneficial to Nigeria as a whole? And will that also speak to the issue around transparency when it comes to spendings like this?
It's very, very interesting that you make that comment. And the FCT is notorious for not releasing its budgets. This is not just a Wike issue. In the course of my career and my dealings with the FCT in trying to get their budgets, in trying to get budget implementation reports, it's almost always next to impossible to get these documents. And it really speaks to the entrenched opacity of the FCT as regards, financial transparency and the need for citizens to know how much money is being generated, how much money is being spent, and how well that money is being spent. As much as Nigerians would be pleased and delighted to see the reports, delighted to see the infrastructure being constructed and, some level of goods and services being improved, public goods and services being improved because of that, there is the corresponding responsibility on government's side to provide this information and to have a willingness to explain to Nigerians why they spend this money in this manner and how they intend to raise money. On your point about revenue, the Nigerian political space, and I'm speaking federal level and state level, isn't very well known for having revenues and expenditure meeting themselves. Every now and then you do see a state that earns, a high level of IGR, that raises a lot of IGR. And in combination with FAC, it could be, much more than it spends. But by and large, especially for the federal government, you have what we call deficit spending, where you are basically spending more than you earn. And for a territory like the FCT, it's important that citizens know exactly how much is being earned and how these processes can be improved to be more efficient and effective.
Yeah, you talked about the FAC allocation. Now, when we look at the excerpt, it actually mentioned that the FCTA statutory revenue fund as the source of this supplementary budget. So are you concerned about the FCT's ability to replenish the statutory fund after using such a large amount for this media spending? You talked about over ₦1 trillion that has been expended or that has been made available for the FCT in the first quarter of this year, I believe, and now another supplementary budget's coming on board. And there are questions around the financing and if the FCT will be able to replicate in terms of numbers. You've also talked about revenue deficits, what is to be expended, what is, if I could put it in a bracket of ROI. So how do we balance the books?
Yeah, great question. The fact is that public authorities need to understand that their states, or the territories that they administer, are going concerns. By going concerns, I mean there are different aspects of their territories, whether it be through licenses, through fines, through some forms of taxation, through rates, through rents, through sale and management of property, that they can derive revenue. And it's very unfortunate that Nigerian politicians, by and large, tend to see the areas upon which they govern as mainly their fiefdoms. They don't really see that they're responsible for generating economic activity that, by the way, would benefit the state in the long run, because you'd have more revenue available for the states. You'd have more revenue available for the territory to execute projects that it believes are important to it without having to wait for a federal allocation or for some statutory allocation from some source. So the eyes must be on how the FCT is going to raise money to replenish what has been given or what has been budgeted. For instance, housing taxation or taxation on landed properties. It's a known secret that a lot of buildings, owned by very wealthy Nigerians are in the FCT. But subsequent question would be: are these homeowners are they paying the right and appropriate amount of property taxes for these homes? A lot of them, do not have human beings dwelling in them, and they are just left, unoccupied. Shouldn't there be some form of penalty for building this massive home to the state? Because you are, in some sense, sitting on an asset, and it should be beneficial at least to the government that owns the land under which it is being built. And you add this to other aspects, that Abuja or the FCT is actually poised to collect, being the melting pot of Nigeria, being the seat of government, being where all the consulates are, where foreigners fly in from. There is untold levels of, income that the FCT can raise in different aspects of tourism, healthcare, education. Yeah. It runs the whole gamut, of what a state could earn, for instance. So while we're waiting with bated breath to see how well we can implement, these projects that he has started, there needs to be a corresponding role by him to ensure that Abuja is a safe place. It's a safe place for business, it's a safe place for investment, and it's a safe place for Nigerians to thrive.
So Vayala, before I let you go, we're in a democratic setting and we see a lot of money is being thrown around without any form of accountability, and we don't even have these figures being put out for public scrutiny before they are being ratified for spending. Is there a way that citizens, institutions, organizations can create a mechanism whereby we begin to hold these public office holders or these public institutions accountable for these taxpayers' money that are being spent without proper documentation?
Absolutely. I mean, for the FCT, you have the House of Representatives and the Senate. For other states, it's the State House of Assembly. But citizens need to understand that Nigerian politicians, more often than not, do not have the incentive to ensure accountability. Because these are the same elites that pass laws, that ensure money is being spent without proper accountability. So you cannot really expect that same level of scrutiny. Citizens need to come together. I tell people, join groups, support the media, support civil society organizations that provide you with this information, with this analysis, support media organizations that have a foot in the door with these politicians, that can ask questions, I can carry out investigative journalism and make this information available to you. But what Nigerians need to do is we cannot do this as individuals. We must be able to come together and work collectively and look past ethnic, religious, regional differences and see that Nigeria's common destiny is something that all of us can benefit from.
All right. Vayala Kwaga, our senior researcher and policy analyst, Budget Foundation, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us.
Delighted as always.